everybody, I am Louise Edington, the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology. It's a great pleasure to be here today again with the EA Zoom meetings. Thanks, Linda, as always, for asking me. And today I'm going to present on Ceres and talk about the grief we have for what was, especially pertaining to our current situation in the globe, in the world. Okay, and Ceres does represent grief. So Ceres, I find her endlessly fascinating, actually, as I find all the dwarf planets. But Ceres was discovered in 1801 by Giuseppe Piazzi, and she was numbered asteroid number 1. She is in the asteroid belt that lies between, I put belts, it's belt, that lies between Mars and Jupiter. And she constitutes 25% of the asteroid belt's mass. And so she's pretty huge. But she's the only dwarf planet inside Neptune's orbit, because after the discovery of dwarf planet Eris in 2005, Ceres was promoted to dwarf planet status and Pluto was demoted to the same status. So officially we have this whole new designation of planets. I don't like the name dwarf planet. I kind of wish they would name it something else, because they certainly are powerful energies. I think we all know the power of Pluto if we've got anything to do with astrology. Ceres' orbit is 1,680 Earth days, and that's approximately 4.6 years, just a little over that. So, you know, she moves around pretty rapidly, a bit like most of the asteroid belt. They move about that speed. But her preeminence has come back, I think, since being promoted, and she's just come more back into our consciousness since Eris discovery and the other dwarf planets. There's Haumea and Sedna and several others as well, and Eris, one of my favorites too. But Ceres the Goddess. Ceres was the Roman goddess of agriculture, grain, and the love a mother bears for her child. She was the daughter of Saturn and Ops, sister of Jupiter, mother of Persephone. And the Greek equivalent was Demeter and Persephone. To the Romans, she was seen as a benevolent and kind goddess. She was worshipped for the gift of the harvest as a reward for cultivation of the land, credited with teaching humans how to grow, preserve, and prepare the grain. The word cereal, in fact, comes from Ceres. Her responsibility as a goddess in Rome was for the fertility of the land and for the harvest, but she was also the goddess of the plebeians, or the common people, and I think that's very relevant right now. She was one of the Dei or Dei Consentes, which were one of the 12 major deities in the pantheon of ancient Rome. Ancient Rome had 6 gods and 6 goddesses, and so 12, how astrological. And they sat in circle and all had their realms and to rule over Rome. And it's kind of my belief that we are being given an opportunity to move back to more council or Dei Consentes kind of government if we listen to the opportunities that Ceres is presenting to us over the next about 4.5-5 years, and that's what I'm going to be looking at. Ceres, I said, represents grief and loss, and that's represented by the classic story about Ceres, one of the stories that's most commonly told. So Ceres' daughter, Persephone, was kidnapped by Pluto, the lord of the underworld. So we can see how all these planets are tying in together now. And her brother, Jupiter, gave Pluto permission for Pluto to marry her daughter. Ceres was stricken with grief at the loss of her daughter and disguised herself as an old woman to live amongst the common people, or plebeians. In her grief, she stopped all crops from growing, which caused a famine, and nothing could console her for the loss of her child. Jupiter eventually realized that Persephone had to be returned to her mother, but he found out that Pluto had already had Persephone eaten the pomegranate seeds. Sorry about the typo there. This is an allegory for losing her virginity too. And therefore, Persephone could never return to the world above permanently. So they kind of struck a deal, Pluto, Jupiter, and Persephone was allowed to return to her mother every spring, but had to return to Pluto and the underworld every autumn or fall. And this story is used to tell the story of the turning of the seasons of nature, including the cycles of life, death, and rebirth of all things. So in astrology, Ceres represents many things. She represents deep mother love. She's often referred to as the Great Mother or the Earth Mother. She represents grief and loss and also forgiveness. Actually, I think I didn't put that one on there. She also represents how we nurture ourselves and others, and how we feed ourselves, really, what we need. She represents attachment, dependency, separation and rejection, work and productivity of kind of the land type, if you like, fertility and the cycles of birth and death, the land, ecology, cultivation and the harvest, organic gardeners and farming, the food supply, restaurants, food workers, organic gardeners, cycles of nature, the seasons and the cycles of life itself, of mammal life, animal care and farming, labour unions, and unemployment. She represents all of these things. And Demetra George, in her amazing book, The Asteroid Goddesses, says she also represents adaptation and survival of the species. And given our current situation in the globe, I kind of think that's really important, okay? And why do I think Ceres is playing such a big part in this? Well, on January the 12th, 2020, astrologers were very aware that Saturn and Pluto met at 22 degrees Capricorn. And it's generally considered that the coronavirus pandemic that we're going through was kind of activated as a Saturn-Pluto event. But who was there with Saturn and Pluto? Well, we had the Sun as well, and Mercury. They were also there, and they will play their part going forward as well in this cycle that I'm going to look at. But Ceres was right there as well, and she was only 10 solar arc minutes from Pluto and Saturn, her father, Pluto, who kidnapped her daughter, and they were all together at 22 degrees Capricorn on January the 12th, 2020. So this was the beginning of many cycles that are going to affect our lives over the next few months and years ahead. But I'm just going to take a closer look at the Ceres-Pluto cycle now. Always bearing in mind, of course, that there's all the other influences coming into what's happening in our globe. For example, and I will be speaking to this, Eris was square at 23 degrees to the major conjunction in Capricorn. Haumea was over here in Libra, pretty much opposite Eris and square to this as well. Now, I'm not going to talk much about Haumea, but I want you to remember that these planets were there. So Eris is chaos and discord, and she, to my mind, is the ripper down of the white picket fence and revealing the artifice and the and the corruption of the elites, that's and the ruling classes, if you like. That's kind of her role astrologically, to my mind. Haumea I know less about, but I do know she's the goddess of fertility and rebirth, and she's in Libra, and you know, she's another newly discovered dwarf planet that is giving us this opportunity to rebirth. It's my opinion that these dwarf planets are really important since Eris discovery in 2005. We've now got quite a few, so I can't go into them all. Maybe I'll research them all eventually. So major themes brought to light since that big conjunction. So we had the Ceres-Pluto conjunction, bringing to the fore the attachment to our safety, to the big daddy in Capricorn, and with Saturn there as well. How we have given our authority away to kind of the ruling institutions and the governments to nurture us and to make us secure. And since this, it's no longer feels secure with all that's going on and the chaos and the pandemic and the lack of support, particularly in the USA. I have to say that the people, the plebeians, have been feeling from the ruling institutions. Okay, this is really bringing it to light. As again, Demetra George said, the nurturing principle, Ceres, combines with Pluto the transformative urge to uncover what's not nurturing us anymore. Okay. So what else has been brought to light? How we nurture ourselves, what we take in literally, food, and metaphorically, the rules of our institutions. The breakdown of the food supply since the virus is becoming apparent. You know, we have coronavirus in meatpacking plants, and all the worry about the contamination of the food supply. You know, with the lockdowns, we've had food not being bought by restaurants and being literally destroyed. It's showing up how our institutions and our systems do not work anymore to support us. Okay. We've also had the breakdown of thinking our governments and institutions care for us, as I mentioned before, and it's really the resulting grief for this. I get the picture of the end scene of Planet of the Apes, where he's going, "What have we done?" kind of thing. I think there's a lot of that going on at the moment, or coming to the light as a result of this major conjunction in January. We're realizing the system doesn't only not nurture us, but it doesn't nurture the common man, the people. You know, we now have huge unemployment, and people are not being able to pay their rent, their mortgages, and not being able to, there's lines at food banks, and you know, the people are really starting to suffer. And globally, there's going to be other kind of things as well as a result of this, with Ceres being the climate. We've got the cyclone in India, and I think there's going to be some mass starvation events and things if we're not listening to the message. This is what I always think, that we are given these opportunities to do things differently, and but I do see some hope. I do see that some people are trying to do that. So Pluto's excavated the failures in the system of unfettered capitalism, of factory farming, no social safety net, the focus on, you know, military and wars and things like that. It's all showing that the people are suffering again. Okay. So then we had Ceres moved into Pisces, and after this conjunction, where she's, you know, moved into the place of immense grief and loss, and also there's a general revealing and drawing back the curtain as well of what's not working, and Ceres is going to go retrograde soon, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. This is kind of where I started my exploration of Ceres, with something I noticed about her retrograde. So we're experiencing a lot of grief and loss for the life we had, that's meant to say. But we can't go back. So we hear a lot of people going, I can't wait to go back to normal. I can't wait to do this. I can't wait, till I can do this again. The noise pollution is starting up again, and the actual pollution itself is kind of going up again as people want to go back. Now, yes, people have to live, so I'm not making this a political thing, but I think we are being told we have to find another way. And if we don't start to, then there's going to be more suffering. So I just wanted to give you a couple of quotes, because Ceres has moved into the mutable sign of Pisces, and there's major connections between her path and the path of Mercury and all that's happening in Gemini currently, which I'm going to mention. So there's two quotes. There are things known and unknown. In between, there are doors of perception. But when the doors of perception are cleansed, to my mind, that's a very Piscean word, all things will be seen as they truly are, infinite. William Blake, The Doors of Perception. And the other quote is, each person is at each moment capable of remembering all that has ever happened to him and of perceiving everything that is happening everywhere in the universe. The function of the brain and nervous system is to protect us from being overwhelmed and confused by this mass of largely useless and irrelevant knowledge, by shutting out most of what we should otherwise perceive or remember at any moment, and leaving us only that very small and special selection which is likely to be practically useful. And that was Aldous Huxley. Now, I really like that quote, because to my mind, the aspects and degrees and things I'm going to talk about in a minute are right now, especially as we go into eclipse season, especially as Mercury's in Gemini and Ceres is in Gemini, and we've got so much happening at the moment. And we've got today, or just before the new moon, as I present this, Mercury is meeting up with Venus retrograde in Gemini. There's just so much mutable, which is, the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. We've got so much mutable energy that we've got this massive overwhelm of knowledge, information floating around in our heads, and we are to filter it out and to do what we can and find that small and special selection which is likely to be practically useful. And I particularly love those words, because I think we're each invited to do our part to basically protect our home and heal it so that humanity can live on it, continue to live on it. So the dates and themes I wanted to look at that are happening pretty much now and this year. And then I'm going to look a lot further ahead as well at this cycle. So Ceres will station retrograde on July the 7th at 12 degrees Pisces. And that's the exact degree that Mercury stationed retrograde at on February the 17th, right after all this stuff kicked off, okay, the pandemic and things. Of course, there's other problems been building, but we're in this major crisis. Ceres will travel the exact degrees that Mercury did and station direct at 28 degrees Aquarius on October the 18th, where Mercury was on March the 10th. So look back to that Mercury retrograde period for clues as to what's going to happen in this retrograde over this summer. Both Mercury and Ceres station retrograde was square to the Venus star point, where the Sun and Venus will meet in the middle of the current Venus retrograde in Gemini. That's going to be at 13 Gemini. So this Venus retrograde, and Venus herself is connected to these cycles intimately as well. And as I said, Mercury is conjunct Venus on tomorrow's Gemini new moon. So you cannot make this stuff up. I was given this date to present this as this was happening. So our minds are really connecting our shifting values and relationships to the grief and loss we are incurring. All our perceptions are changing. Our unemployment is high, food supplies threatened, the plebeians suffering the most, more talk of the need. Ceres is our needs for social safety nets, Medicare for all that kind of thing. They've got neighbourhood resiliency initiatives starting up with people coming together in community to create food gardens, with each giving according to their ability. There's one in my neighbourhood that I've signed up for. I am not a gardener, I admit. I always wish I was, and I don't really have the inclination or the knowledge, but they have landowners. So I've got some yard that I could give, and I'm going to have people come in and create the food garden and they'll take a lot of the produce. So all these initiatives are starting and being created. We also have a permaculture guild locally, and I know they're starting up in many other places. Some of them have been around a while, but I'm noticing a real uptick in these things since this conjunction. Okay, and as I said before, some people are just wanting to go back to normal, to that safety that we came from, but many are beginning to acknowledge the need for systemic change, cleaner air and less noise pollution that we've experienced under the lockdowns. Some people see the good that was coming out, even though, you know, people still need to work. So Venus retrograde in Gemini is causing us to re-examine our values and our worth in our relationships as well. And when Ceres retrogrades, we'll be revisiting that period from February the 17th to March the 10th. And also since April the 18th, when she entered the shadow of her retrograde. I kind of think all these, this period, I have to say, I think we're going to have an increase in numbers again in the coronavirus, and particularly where we're not listening to the message of what the planets are asking us to, how we're being asked to transform, okay, and evolve. So I want to look ahead now, and there's some interesting correlations to now. So the first quarter square for Ceres and Pluto is a year away, on April the 30th, 2021. And Pluto, I've highlighted the dates. Pluto will be at 26 degrees Capricorn then, so will not have moved too much, basically, because as we know, he's a very slow planet. He'll still be in square to Eris, but look who's next to Eris. We have Ceres next to Eris, and Eris was in square on January the 12th to the two of them. So Ceres will have moved that quarter and joined Eris, the goddess of chaos and discord. Haumea is still over here in Libra. She'll be opposing, so forming a T-square, a cardinal's T-square. The cardinal crisis term came about, you know, really, or when I really started to use it, was when I really started in astrology professionally, when we had the Uranus-Pluto square happening, and all that chaos is amplified now by all these transits. Other coincidences or synchronicities, I don't think there ever are any, is that Jupiter will be at 28 degrees Aquarius, which is the station direct point of both Mercury and Ceres this year. And the Saturn will be in Aquarius then. The two of those will have met at 0 degrees Aquarius on December the 21st, 2020, for their great conjunction. And that degree, 0 Aquarius, is going to become very important when we look ahead at some other charts. All right. So another thing I noticed as well was that the North Node, by the time the first quarter square, will have moved to 11 degrees of Gemini, with the South Node, of course, 11 degrees of Sagittarius. The nodes have us, you know, shifting away from the dogma and thinking we know the truth and the need to be right, and to this open-minded space again of curiosity and of learning new ways and being really open. And those two are in square to the point where both Mercury and Ceres station retrograde this year. So, and also, of course, the North Node is 2 degrees from where the Venus star point is. And the Venus star point at 13 degrees on June the 3rd of this year is setting the scene for a new 8-year cycle for Venus. So all these degrees are being activated over and over again. And a lot of it is very change bringing and chaos bringing. And this is why I don't think we're going to be over yet. I mentioned that Ceres will be conjunct Eris on the first quarter square next April. Well, this will be at the point where Pluto and Eris have they have 5 exact squares. The first one was on January the 26th, so definitely also connected to the crisis of the pandemic. The next one's on June the 14th. We have another one, I think it's October of this year, 2020. But after this first quarter square on April the 30th, 2021, Eris and Pluto have 2 more exact squares before the end of 2021. So Ceres is really kind of activating that chaotic, transformational, evolutionary event as well. So she's very much tied into all of these major changes that we have going on. Now, the Ceres opposition to Pluto will be in July, on July the 17th of 2022. Now, if I can take you back to January the 12th of this year, 2020, we had the major conjunction of Saturn, Pluto, the Sun, Mercury, and Ceres, all at 22 degrees of Capricorn. Well, when Ceres is opposing Pluto, the Sun and Mercury are exactly conjunct where she is too. Well, by a couple of degrees, close enough. And I don't think there's ever any coincidences in these things. We also have Eris still in orb of her square to Pluto and still in orb of making the T-square to this. So the opposition is kind of more like a full moon, if you like. Things that began on that major conjunction of January 2020 will reach some kind of fruition and fulfillment on this opposition on July the 17th, 2022. By then, we've got other shifts in energy. We've got Venus will actually be where the North Node is today at that point. So all these points keep activating themselves over and over again, or being activated. And so interestingly as well, on this opposition, Neptune will be at 25 degrees, which is a degree that's highlighted throughout the chart. And Neptune, you know, is moving towards the end of his period in Pisces, which has been shifting our connection with spirit and nature, I think, as well. So,
Louise?
Yes?
How wide of an orb do you use for Ceres?
I use it depends what she's in conjunction with or opposition with. I probably use 2 to 3 degrees, unless it's like the sun or the moon.
Right, thank you. That was that question was from Amy in the chat. Oh, and we do have another question. Is that okay? Anne says, in February 2021, I have a Ceres return in Pisces. Is this energy when having a return more important?
Not sure what she means. Let me just go back and chart. So but she's having her personal Ceres return,
Yes.
February 2021.
In
Ceres,
yes.
Ceres. Okay, will Ceres still be in Pisces by then? It must be very late Pisces. Well, this energy, I think, if she's connected, if her natal Ceres is very close to Neptune, it's being very activated right now, then she'll be feeling a lot of this very mutable kind of confusion that I'm feeling right now because of all my mutable planets being lit up like Christmas trees. So she'll be shifting her faith, her belief, her trust, her connection with nature. I do. Does she know what degree her Ceres is at?
Anne, are you able to unmute?
It's hard to see.
Yes, I'm here.
Right.
Good.
My Ceres is a natal in Pisces on 27 degree 39. And on the 15th of February 2021, it's the return of my Ceres.
Yeah, well, I think it's broadly connected to this energy. You know, I don't think it's going to make any major aspects when you actually have your Ceres return, but I think Ceres returns are important, like any return. So I don't know.
It's opposite to my Pluto.
Right. Oh well, then it's probably going to be. But you have your Ceres return about every 4.6 years. So unless it's aspecting any other major planets at the time by transit, then it'll be pretty much like the other Ceres returns. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but it squares also. I have a T-square with my sun and the moon also. I have a grand cross.
And we really must not go too deeply into personal charts because to look at a personal chart, it would really need to be up on the screen. So let's just take general Ceres questions in our chat and not so many really personal ones because they're a little bit too difficult. Okay, Anne?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, thank you.
I will quickly say that because Ceres is at 26 degrees, she's probably going to feel the Ceres Pluto square as part of it. It's probably going to be a big transformation.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Louise. Thank you.
Okay. Just so you know, I'm very visual. So when people just tell me what their chart is, sometimes I find it hard to see.
Oh, yes. Me too. Yes.
Okay, so that was the opposition. And then we have in 2023, we have the third quarter or closing square. And remembering that remembering that Haumea is over in Libra still, and I'll talk about when she leaves there. We have another major cardinal T square. And this time, Ceres will be down here in, Ceres will be conjunct the South Node, which will then be in Libra, and will be conjunct Haumea, which is the goddess of fertility and rebirth. And to my mind, this is kind of when we're going to start the rebirth, if you like. And this is where, you know, if we think of the cycle of Ceres and Pluto, we started in January, we went to the opposition, where there was this kind of fulfillment. My hope is that we are learning the lessons of this cycle by then. And by the time we get to the third square or the third quarter closing square on September the 10th, 2023, we're beginning to move towards our destiny and towards the new beginning, which will start at the next cycle, which is quite major. I'll show you that one in a minute. So Ceres will be, by that point, at 28 Libra, conjunct Haumea, conjunct the South Node. But on the opposite point, we still have Eris, because she moves so slowly, the North Node in Aries. But we have Chiron 5 degrees away, but I want to say that's a conjunction, talking of orbs, because it's such a, it's, you know, we've got Pluto there, and Pluto orbs are generally felt quite widely, and because it's a T-square as well, I think they're all kind of coming together. And I think this is reaching the point where we have this amazing opportunity to pioneer the North Node in Aries, some real new ways of living, and to really kind of bring ourselves out of this chaos and mess, and even you know, even perhaps pioneer new forms of government. By this time, by 2023, the USA, I try not to make it too USA centric, but we are kind of, what happens here does affect the rest of the world to a degree. We will have had our Pluto return, which is happening 3 times exact in 2022. It's still undergoing by the time of 2023. We'll be leading into the next US election. So will everything have changed? Will we have realized we kind of have a big crisis in all our ruling systems, which is kind of where I started, and our social safety nets? And will there even be, perhaps, you know, no longer a United States as we know it? Will it break up? We're clearly in crisis. You know, I think our current president is playing his part and his role in this breakdown and pretty much a constitutional crisis, if you like, in many ways. And I don't mean to be political by saying that, because I do think all these people are kind of players in this great cosmic game, if you like, that we're running in. But I kind of think that the opportunity at this closing square, it's a closing square in the lunar cycle, is called a crisis in consciousness. It's, will we realize that, you know, we have to bring a complete rebirth of our systems, of our how we work, how we break up our government, how we rule, everything like that. All the systems, I think, are going to break down, and I think we're going to recreate new. So I do think there's hope, so long as we do it. And then it brings me to the start of the next Ceres Pluto cycle. So on December the 7th, my husband's birthday, 2024, Ceres and Pluto meet again, and they meet at the exact same degree where Pallas Athena is today and Saturn is about to retrograde back to. It's the same degree that Jupiter and Saturn meet at that 20-year great conjunction on December the 21st of this year, 2020. So we're going to kind of get an indication of what's coming. But I think this is major. If you've been listening to all the other things I've talked about all the way, Venus was very much tied into this Ceres cycle. And Venus is our values. You know, I think Venus is very much kind of underestimated in much astrology, that by talking about it as just love and harmony and peace, because I think she's way deeper than that. I think she's about our core values, about how we value ourselves, what we are worth, how we value others as well. And she's in almost exact conjunction with Ceres and Pluto on December the 7th, 2024. All 3 are at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and we are moving into the age of Aquarius. Nobody seems exactly sure when we're going to enter it, because it's a process, but many astrologers think it's when Pluto enters Aquarius. I wonder if this conjunction has an awful lot to do with it, because it's a very healing time. We're moving into a new age. We can move into new innovations, new ways of doing things. We still have over here in Aries, we have Chiron again, moved all the way around and goes to very close to Eris again. We also have asteroid Hygeia there, which I haven't mentioned before, but Hygeia is currently in Gemini and has been very much to do with the spread of this coronavirus, because she's in an air sign. Hygeia represents health and hygiene. We've had a very big focus on the washing the hands, on it being airborne, on all that kind of thing, which is all very Gemini. And she, by this time of this next cycle starting, is over here about shaking up how we do health and healing. Chiron is also the shaman. He was the medicine man. So I think that's huge potential for new beginnings as well. And another thing that's happening on this next cycle starting with Ceres Pluto in 2024, or at the end of 2024, is that Sedna is at 0 degrees of Gemini. And so she's in a trine aspect to this conjunction here. And the South Node in Libra is forming this air grand trine as well. Now, Sedna is, according to Alan Clay, who does Dwarf Planet Astrology, he says she represents spiritual destiny through crisis. I have not had a chance to read his book yet or study her more, but I did a short class with him, and she's moving into Gemini. That's a sign of the mind and of how we socialize. Aries is about a very social sign as well, and about community. Libra is also an air sign, very social. Sedna actually enters Gemini on April the 27th, 24, after being in Taurus since 1968. And so that's going to be a huge shift. And all these energies are in aspect to each other in air signs. Now, some of the things we've always got the free will with all these evolutionary big movements in the skies. You know, we're seeing kind of outrageous things come out. Well, I've seen some of them as well. My husband showed me one last night about how we're going to be eating in restaurants in future, that we'll go in a mask and sit down, and this kind of pod will come over our head so we can't spread our germs everywhere. Now, I hope it doesn't go that way. I hope it doesn't go to more social separation. I hope we find more inventive ways to do this, and more ways of coming back into local community and to heal the earth and to healing our food cycle, because after all, this virus probably started with the food market. It may have started in the lab. Either way, it's from humans messing with things and food supplies and viruses and everything. So I kind of hope we learn our lesson for doing things that we should not do with the earth, and under our patriarchal system that we've been living under. We think we have dominion and control, and nature comes back and bites us on the butt, basically, is what I'm going to say. Also, you know, coming up just after that, we've got Uranus will enter Gemini on July the 7th, 25. So also entering into into the air sign there, and joining Sedna there. And Uranus rules Aquarius. So I think the year starting towards the end of 2024 and into 2025 and onwards is going to be a huge leap in research, in inventions, in new ways of living, also new ways of governing, though. I really do think we're going to get that as well. And to come back to Haumea briefly, she's not on the chart because she's not in this software, but she also finally leaves Libra in October 2023. after being in there since 1992 and 1994. So she's leaving a cardinal sign too, Libra. So the cardinal crisis is beginning to kind of be over. We've got some mutability with inventions and research coming, but then we're moving into this more fixed sign of bringing the new into actual being, is kind of how I see the cycles developing. Okay, so I am going to ask you all to do a shamanic journey. This is kind of my signature thing. Now, normally I drum with these things, but Zoom, since the coronavirus and the explosion in people using Zoom, has changed so much in it and changed its settings that it will not pick my drum up. It makes it fade in and fade out. So I'm working on recording my own drum tracks to do journeys. So for this one, I am going to use a drum track from YouTube for the audio. Those of you that have worked with me before, I know some of my clients are here, or have listened to my presentations before, know what to do, but I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. I want to keep this really easy. Okay, should we ask if there's any more questions first, or no, there aren't any, I don't think so.
No, nothing from Facebook either.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
We'll go and do the journey then. So I just want to make this very easy. You just close your eyes, let the drums take you away. Just imagine yourself in a starting place. And we are going to do an upper world journey, and imagine yourself going up to Ceres herself. And I want you to go up to Ceres. You go up however works for you. Just trust what you get. You may fly up, you may climb up a ladder, climb up a beanstalk or steps, whatever. You'll probably have a spirit guide with you for the journey. And then when you get to Ceres, just have a conversation with her. See what she looks like, see what message she's got for you. You know, ask Ceres what you need to know for this cycle that we're currently in, that to my mind is pretty huge, okay? And just keep asking questions. Towards the end of the journey, which is just 12 minutes long, it's not long, the drum sound changes, and that's called the callback. So then you will thank Ceres and just finish up your visit with the energy that is Ceres, and come back to Earth, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to share the YouTube screen and share the computer sound, because that's apparently works, and I'm hoping this works. I do want to say that Mercury is out of bounds, Venus is out of bounds, which means they're both acting erratically. Mercury out of bounds can be very like a Mercury retrograde. So if there's any technical problems, it's Mercury. So last time I did it yesterday on a class call that I did, and I'd say 90% of people had no problem. If you're having a problem, it's probably your end. So I suggest going and doing the journey later to a journey on. You can find shamanic journeys on YouTube all over the place. So if you want to close your eyes and just get relaxed and deep breathe and let the drumming take you away. Okay, I'm sorry. It appears that the drumming.
Louise, okay.
I'm gonna post the drum track in the YouTube group.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, yeah. There is a way we can get the sound to work, but maybe not for today.
Well, I used the recommended way to work.
But then
So
you need to check the box, share computer sound.
yes, I did.
Did you?
I did.
Oh, okay. But you know what? We were doing the meditation anyway, so.
And if anybody wants to continue the whole journey, they can, you know,
Okay, Louise. So, okay, would you like to now, any questions from our audience before we wind down?
I have just an end screen to share that I didn't share before, so I'll just share that as well. And yeah, I'm really sorry about that. So I told you that Mercury and Venus are out of bounds, and I practiced it before as well. So I'm just going to go through again to the end screen. Morning star. Oh, I guess I'm not. Nothing is working now. Forget it. Any questions?
Louise, in regards to the Saturn-Pluto Ceres Mercury conjunction, the theme of death, of course, I feel is part of that.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the survival aspect of Ceres, and you know, and people rushing out and stocking their cupboards with like too much food and too much this and that. But it's really bringing to light the problems that people have around food, the deeper issues.
I think,
Yep.
you're right. Yeah, I think so. I don't have anything more to add about that. You know, I think to me that's part of the whole food thing. You know, and people are having to learn how to cook as well, and
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and people wanting to grow food and they don't know how to, and it's like,
Yes.
you know.
Well, have we come to the end?
We have, unless I can, there's a question. Any recommendations with my great attractor on my natal Ceres? Oh, you've got yours is my Jupiter's right there as well. Yeah, well, it's hard without the whole chart, to be honest, again, but you'll be feeling a lot of this change this year. You may be going through a lot more, and I'm feeling it because my moon's at 12 Gemini, and my at 14 Sagittarius in the 12th house, so it's all mutable. So it's feeling a very confusing time. The only thing I can suggest is what I'm doing and remaining very open and to what comes along, and trying to go with the flow, and to be and to follow the nudges, you know, to do this healing. I've joined this neighborhood resiliency initiative because I see the need for it in the astrology and feel it in myself, even though I don't garden and don't know anything about it. So it may show up differently for you, but it's very much, I think, about tuning into the flow of what's happening. And I love a quote from Inanna, her journey into the underworld that I'm doing in my current Venus class. And she opens her ears to the great below. And it's kind of keeping this curiosity, this open mind, asking questions. It's going to be a very confusing time for everybody, I think. Very big ball of confusion. This year, particularly with all these mutable middle degrees being hit and us going through so many changes, it's going to kind of leave us feeling thrown from pillar to post, to my mind. So I hope that answers your question. Anybody else?
Sorry.
Well, Louise, I feel like I have 100 questions, but they're all personal, so I can't ask them here. But I really appreciate this talk, and all of this is just really making sense to me. So, and really, thanks for the heads up on the 2024 energy.
Yeah, I know it seems a long way away, but really it's not, is it? So,
yeah, no, not really.
to my mind, it gives us something to focus on for what part we can play in the healing, you know, bringing it back down from that quote, that Aldous Huxley quote, to the small practical things we can do to bring the change. So.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you.
Louise, thank you so much for these wonderful reminders. Thank you to our audiences. Would you now all please unmute and thank Louise Edington.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Louise.
Thanks for being here. It's easier with an audience.